Hey there, welcome to Feast and Farm Cooks. My name is Rachel Ballard, and this is the channel where I teach you how to cook more from scratch in your own home kitchen so you can eat better and feel better. It is cherry season on the farm, and I have picked so many gallons this year, and I have been freezing and canning those, and today it's time to put those to use. So we're gonna make my most favorite pie ever, a homemade cherry pie. If you've ever had those cardboard things from the store, they are a sad comparison to the real deal. So join me in the kitchen as we make our pie completely from scratch with an all butter crust that's more like a croissant than a pie crust, and an all natural filling with no dyes or fillers that is absolutely gonna just blow your mind. Join me in the kitchen, let's get started. We're going to start out by making our pie crust, and I know everybody just is terrified of pie crust, but please don't be. This is going to be very simple. So in this bowl I have 3 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. We are going to add 2 teaspoons of salt and 3 tablespoons of sugar to this. Now this is a sweet pie, right? But if you are making something savory and want to use this same recipe, just leave the sugar out. It's just fine. So we're just going to stir those together, and I know somebody's going to ask me for the gram measurements, and I'll try to get those together for you if I can. And then we're going to add butter, not just a little bit. We're going to add 3 sticks, and this is actually grated. I grated this on a box grater. I'm going to put in a little bit to start, not all of it, and I'm going to just toss it around in the flour to kind of break it up. I find this is so much simpler than trying to work with cubes and stand there with a pastry blender or a couple of forks and do this all day long. It's just so much simpler. So use your box grater and grate it up. You're still going to get clumps, but you kind of want those clumps because those make your flakes. So just toss that around in there, and this is going to feel like you have more butter than you have flour. That's what makes it delicious. So I know there are lots of people who use Crisco or butter flavored shortenings, those sorts of things in their pie crusts. I don't, because we gave up on vegetable oil and all of its derivatives a few years ago because of the way it's made and the ingredients that are in it and how inflammatory it is to your body. It's just not a healthy food, right? So we go back to eating cream and salt in the form of butter, and that's what works for us. We're going to add a little bit of water. Now the problem here for a lot of people is how much water, and I wish that I could give you an easy answer to that, and I just can't. What I have here in this measuring cup is a whole cup of ice cold water. I've actually had a chunk of ice floating in this. It has melted a little bit. 3/4 of a cup should bring this together, but I'm just going to start with about half of what I have there, and I'm going to start working this in with a fork, and we're going to just see, because the thing is that with humidity in your air, your flour is going to need less moisture and less water. If you live in an area where the air is very dry, your flour needs more water, so you have to just kind of go by eyeball. So just pay attention to what I'm doing here, and we'll talk about the texture when we get to the right spot. So see here, okay, so this is about how you want it. It's not totally together. It's not a big sticky mass. I don't have a lot of loose stuff in the bottom, but what happens is we're gonna let this sit in the refrigerator, and once it sits, the liquids from the water is going to really hydrate the flour, and it's gonna change texture. So I'm not worried about those crumbly bits in the bottom. So I'm gonna pull it out here. Let's take it out of the bowl. Put it out on the counter. And let's just give it a couple of turns. See all this loose stuff down here? All that, make sure you can see all this loose flour that's laying there. It's okay. So let's give this a couple of kneads, just lightly. You don't want to really knead a pie crust because you don't want to make it tough. And we don't want to melt all the butter that we've put in here. But we do want to try to bring it together. And I'm just going to do that loosely here. Try not to rattle my camera everywhere so you can see. And like I said, this is a huge amount of dough. So if you wanted to make just one crust, like a bottom crust, and you were going to do something else for the top, like a crumble or something, you can make a half batch of this. Or this dough is wonderful to freeze. So once you've made the batch, if you want to cut it in half and put half away for another recipe later, you can wrap it well in plastic wrap and put it in your freezer, and it'll be there for you for many months to come. I'm going to wrap each of these in plastic wrap, and I'm going to put them away in the refrigerator until we get the filling made. And once our filling is made, these will be chilled enough that we'll be able to bring them out and use them in our pie. Be back in just a little bit. To make our homemade filling, I think we first need to discuss cherries. So in your store, you're probably going to find red tart cherries pitted and in water. You're going to find these over in the canned fruit section, usually up on the top shelf somewhere. This is what I'm going to recommend you use here. I know that there are big, beautiful, expensive cherries in your grocery store right now in the bags. They don't have any flavor. Not to me, they don't. So I highly recommend that if you're not going to have your own, which these are mine and they're canned, this is what I'm going to be using today, which are, you know, from my trees. But in your grocery store, absolutely just pick up a couple of cans of these and make sure they say tart and that they are in water. Okay, so that's what you're going to look for. What we're going to do though is we're going to strain these. We need 1 cup of liquid. Now let's say, for example, that you were using a cherry, maybe you want to use fresh sour cherries. If you want to do that, you're going to need to use a liquid. So you could add cherry juice. You can buy, you know, unsweetened Montmorency cherry juice in your grocery store. You could absolutely top this off with some apple juice if you needed to. But I'm just going to strain this. Let me move this so you can see what we're doing here. We're just going to strain. You'll just strain your can. I'm just straining my jar of cherries in there, and I've got almost we're going for a cup, and I've got almost that much, so I'm gonna take my second one here because this is flavor. You don't want to lose this part, and this is going to be part of your filling. Okay, there's our 1 cup of liquid, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that. Now, one thing I want to point out to you guys, please note that these cherries are not red. Okay, they are kind of a sad little pink color, and that's the true color of food. So there are going to be times that you're like, oh no, this isn't, my filling's not red. Well, you know, red means red dyes, and we learned an awfully long time ago in this house that red food dye was not anything that we could eat. My daughter, it was the beginning of our journey to better food, was because of my daughter's struggle with red food dye. So if you feel like you just need to color this, you do you, okay? But I'm gonna highly suggest that you don't color this. And if you do wanna color it, I'm gonna leave some links in the description box to some natural food dyes that you can pick up that will kind of help pop the color without, you know, any of that extra stuff in there. So I'm gonna put this in our skillet, or not our skillet, in our pot here. Give me just a second. So into our pot, we're gonna add that 1 cup of liquid from our cherries. Then we're going to put in 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Now this is, I always used to use flour, but cornstarch I think sets up a little more reliably, so that's what we're going to go with this time. And you have to know that cornstarch dissolves in a cold or room temperature liquid. You do not put it in something after it's boiling, or else it'll make a ton of clumps. So we're just going to whisk this in first. See, it's pink. And this is what your filling is going to look like. It's going to be this color. So if that disappoints you, then, you know, make the adjustments as I said, and you can color yours if you want to. But we're just okay with the color of food as it really is. So there's that. We're going to add just a little pinch of salt, not a whole lot here. Just that was like less than 1/8 of a teaspoon. And you're going to need 1 cup of sugar. Now we've talked about sugar. If you've not seen my video about how to adjust your sugars, you can see that over on the channel. If you want to use honey here, you absolutely can if you have that much honey to go around. I'm going to be putting in 1 cup of sugar. And again, I'm not eating this entire pie, so for me and for my family, that's okay. And these cherries are so sour, so sour. So keep that in mind. If you are using a sweet cherry for some reason, you're going against the recipe and doing that, you will not need this much sugar, but these cherries will really make you pucker. So we're just going to stir that in, and all I'm going to do is bring this up almost to a boil, not quite, but it'll be close. And stove's ready. We're going to get this thickened up, and once it's thick enough, I'll show you what to add next. Now that took about 5 minutes, and I wish you could taste it, but can you see this? Now it's thicker. Let me show you the gauge you need. It's going to simmer until, see how you can draw a line through that? And it holds its shape. And it tastes like the best cherries you ever had. Oh, it's so good. Now, into this, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of butter. Of course, you all know my love for good quality butter. This is never a place for country crock and, you know, fake tub butters. Just use the real thing. If you're going to take the time to make something from scratch, make sure your recipe has the best ingredients possible in it, because it affects the flavor, especially when there are only a few ingredients in a recipe. Now, let that butter start to kind of think about what it's doing there. It'll start to melt. We're going to add some almond extract next. Now, you can ruin a recipe with almond extract. 1/4 teaspoon is all we need. And I'm actually going to put this in the tip measuring spoon over here away from my food. Oops, see, I spilled it. If I had spilled that in my pot, this would be ruined, because especially almond extract. You can get away with it with vanilla, but it's so strong. So almond extract goes in, we'll get that butter nice and melted here, and we'll put our cherries in. Now this is, I didn't tell you, 4 cups of cherries roughly is what we're after. This is 2 pint jars, and we're gonna stir that into that filling. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Like, that's just so pretty to me. No red food dyes, no canned fillings. It's very simple to do this from scratch. That whole thing, even with me talking, I mean, 6 minutes. Right? So now that we have this done, I'm going to set this to the side, and we're going to get our pie crust ready, and we're going to get this thing in the oven. Let's roll out this pie crust. It was in the fridge about ½ hour or so, just enough to firm it up. And I'm going to get some flour out here. Now guys, this is not as hard as you think it's going to be, I can promise you. So look, just a little flour. Now I say a little, like that's just what I pinched up in my hands. It's not that much. We're just going to put a light coating on here. The trick to a pie crust is to always keep it moving, okay? I'm making this a great big circle because I know I have to fit into a 9 by 2 inch pie plate. You start in the middle and you go out, and you start in the middle and you go down to the bottom, up and down, up and down, up and down. Now once you've done a couple of turns, a couple of those, pick it up, get your hands under it, pull that flour back in, give it like a 1/4 turn and put it back down, okay? And then we're gonna do the same thing. And if your rolling pin needs a little more, you can put it on there. Can you see all the little bits of butter in this? It's gonna be wonderful. And you'll notice that it's a lot easier to work with than it was when we first wrapped it up and put it in the refrigerator. And that's because that flour and water had time to kind of get together, think about things, hydrate, and just makes it so much easier to work with. So make sure you're working it all the way around evenly. Don't get a big thick spot up here and a big thin spot in the center. So just work your way around. I wish I had more room. I've got stuff sitting everywhere here. Turn. And then I'll show you the really easy way to get it into your pie plate. This is such a beautiful flaky crust. If you want to use a store-bought crust, you absolutely can. Again, it goes back to the thing to me, if you're going to go to the trouble to make something from scratch, make it from scratch, right? Really make it from scratch. Okay, so here we are. Don't think I'm sticking too bad anywhere. Nothing major. Now, let me see how we're doing with our pie plate. So this is a 9 by 2, my old faithful. She's been here in the house with me forever. We're close. Let me just put a little extra this way. Okay. We're going to put this on here upside down. And our goal is to have, you know, we'd like to have a couple of inches of overhang at this point. If we have much more than that, we can trim it off. So I'm going to go around here and take off some of the extra, and then we'll refine that in just a little bit. So I'm just going to take off that, and that's about it. Now, let me show you how we get this in the pie plate. Easiest method ever. Take your rolling pin. I might just put a little extra flour on it. Starting at the top, pull your crust up. And I'm not pressing this on here, I'm just ever so gently rolling this up. Ever so gently. Look at that. No sticking. It's because we kept turning it. Now, pie plate, pick this up, lift it over your pie plate, get it started, and just unroll it. And you can take a minute to kind of settle it down in there, lift it, drop it in on all the sides so you get it in where it needs to be. Now I'm going to set this to the side for just a minute. We're going to go ahead and roll out the top before I put hot cherry filling in this and then have it sit there and get all soggy. So I'm just going to set this to the side with all of its overhangs and all of its things and show you. Let's do the top, because we're going to make a lattice for this one, I think. And a lattice top is really simple. People make it really hard, and they also cheat and make just kind of throw strips on top of each other, and that's not how you make a lattice either. So let me show you how to do this. Again, make sure you're thoroughly floured. Just put a little bit there and there. Okay, here we go. Gently fold this over and lay it to the side. We'll see how it does for us. All right, so filling is going to go in. And this is not a pie that you want to have running over the top, because it is, you know, thinner. And this pie crust, this pie will need to sit for about 3 hours minimum after it's made before you slice it, to keep everything from just running out everywhere, okay? So let me show you how to do our top. So I'm gonna slide this back over. I just wanted to show you how to fill it. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut strips. I'm gonna dip my knife in the flour, and then I'm gonna just put a light coating on the top here. What I do is I start on one end. Now, if you're really precise and you want these to look just like perfect, measure them. If y'all haven't figured this out by now, I'm probably not gonna measure a whole lot. If you want big wide strips, you can do that. I like mine, you know, 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches across. So I'm gonna go through here and cut these. My longest ones will go in the center, and then the shorter ones obviously will go along the edges. And like I said, if you want this to just like have that seamless, symmetrical look, then please measure. And use a good sharp knife so it goes down through there easily. So I'm gonna organize my strips of dough and just set those to the side, and then let's get started. Now you'll see I have quite a bit of extra dough hanging around the edges. That's okay, we'll trim that up in a minute. Start by laying your longest strip right down the center and leave it hanging over the edge of the pie plate just a little bit. We'll fix that in just a second. And then place your next strips about 1 inch, you know, make them all about 1 inch apart. If you don't want any gaps at all, you can lay them up against each other. That's totally up to you. Okay, so I've got 5 across there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then peeling back numbers 2 and 4 to the middle, you're going to lay your longest strip in the center of your pie plate going the other direction. And then you're going to lay 2 and 4 back over. Then we're going to pull back 1, 3, and 5, and we're going to lay in the next strip about 1 inch apart from the other one, and then we'll lay those back over. It doesn't have to be exact, but it certainly looks better if everything is done that way. Now we're going to fold 2 and 4 back down and put in our next one. 2 and 4 go back up. Now I'm going to work from the bottom up this time, and I'm going to fold up 1, 3, and 5. You'll just have to kind of look at yours to figure out which ones need to get folded up. If you do it wrong, it won't matter. So in goes another strip about 1 inch apart again, and we'll fold those back down. Then we're going to fold up 2 and 4 and lay in the next one. You certainly can just lay them on top of each other if you want to. It just looks nicer, and it's, you know, more authentic if you actually weave them. Now I'm going to take my knife. I'm using a Wusthof. I think a great knife is so important in the kitchen. And I'm going to trim off some of that extra dough. And I'm still leaving about 1/2 inch or so of overhang, but I'm getting rid of some of those really long sections. Where the the lattices are hanging over, if we don't seam those together somehow, the lattice will separate from the bottom crust as it cooks. So going along, I want you to fold all those edges up. Fold, kind of rolling the ends of your lattice pieces and your dough together into this kind of big wad around the sides of the bowl. It's going to work out fine. And remember that this dough, it puffs in the oven more like a croissant because of all the butter. And any mistakes or imperfections that are in your pie crust are going to really disappear as it bakes. They just all puff out. So don't worry about it looking just exactly right. But you can see why you need that little bit of extra overhang so that you have it to tuck over those lattice pieces. Now, once you've got it in there, I've got a little thick spot on this side. Who cares? It's all delicious. When you have a really good pie crust, it doesn't matter if you have a nice thick one because it tastes so good. So now let's make whatever edges you want. I'm going to make the classic. Using my index finger and thumb and my index finger of my right hand, I'm going to press in and make a little dent or a little wedge. Now, if you want to just use a fork here, you can. You can just leave it like it is and no problem. So work your way around through there and just get everything. It's really more about just fusing those two layers of dough together. That's what matters more than anything. All right, now let's put our egg wash on the top. And I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, this is just a beaten egg. Really, there's not even any water in it. You can put a little water in it if you want to. And we're just going to brush this over. We're going to put this on a cookie sheet because I promise you it will probably want to boil over on you. So don't just stick it in your oven. We're going to put this in a 400-degree oven and we're going to bake this at 400 for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to turn the heat down to 375 and we're going to bake it another 30 to 35 minutes. It'll take 45 to 50 minutes. You want your crust to be, you know, completely cooked through. So if you see any doughy spots, especially where the crusts meet, sometimes you'll find some doughy spots. Just keep baking it. And you can put a little layer of aluminum foil around the edge of this. I just make a little ring of aluminum foil and cover the edge of the dough if it starts to get too dark. So I went ahead and waited until the next day to go ahead and slice this up for you. We tried last night. It was just a little too warm. So we're going to slice into it. I had one piece. My son just couldn't wait. He had to have a piece. So the rest of it we put in the refrigerator and I let it sit overnight. So let's take a slice out of here. Yeah. And then, oh, cherry pie. You are so beautiful. Let me move this over so everybody can see. It's just gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. And that filling holds, but it's not like super, super firm. You know, it's nice and soft in there. And you've got the flavor of this is more like a croissant with fresh, bright cherries. For those of you who might want to use a fresh or a frozen cherry in your pie, check the description box below and I'll leave instructions for how to use those. And if you'd like to see more pie recipes, check out my blackberry pie, which is right up here. Thanks guys, have a great day. Bye.